From WHQR Public Media, this is The Newsroom. I'm Ben Schachman. Thanks for joining us. On today's show, I'm sitting down with New Hanover County Commissioner Rob Zapple to talk about his priorities and perspectives on the county's ongoing budget process. We asked Zapple about what he thinks about efforts to make the county more financially efficient, as well as calls to do away with the county's DEI office and having the Endowment step in to help with funding in some areas. This is our unedited interview recorded on the afternoon of Wednesday, March 12th. And just a note, Zapple is a member of the WHQR Board of Trustees, which has no editorial control of this program or our news coverage. All right, Commissioner Rob Zapple, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Ben. It's a delight to be here.
So we are here to talk about budget season, because it's budget season.
It is.
You and your fellow commissioners have been through a couple of budget meetings. So I want to make it clear for people that, we're kind of in the middle of the story. There are some things some things you haven't been filled in yet. But I want to get sort of your take on where things are and where you'd like to see them go. So let's start with this. There's been much conversation about the recent revaluation.
Right.
And I think some people are concerned because they think they have seen numbers like 65% increase in property values, depending on how you slice that pie. And they are concerned that their property bill will go up by that much.
The answer is no, and thank you for bringing that up front. I think we saw, if I remember the numbers correctly, 67.9% as the average, and that's all the properties, well over 10,000 parcels in New Hanover County, all the parcels added in. That's the increase we saw in the valuation. In big numbers, the valuation of New Hanover County went up from $51 billion to $81 billion. That's $30 billion it's gone up in the last 4 years. But that's just the value of that. Now with that new value and those new individual values to each parcel, those are the letters everyone received at the end of February, early March, we will now sit down, look at the data, and figure out the appropriate tax rate that will then will decide what your tax bill will be. We will see a drop in the tax rate from its current position at 45 cents per $100 value. I can guarantee you that. We will see a drop. The question is, by how much will we drop it? And there's been a number of different values that have popped up in this conversation. There's another term that I think those who are tracking this, revenue neutral is another word. And there's a couple different versions of that.
Yeah, let's linger on this for a minute because we have gotten more than a few questions about this. So let's deal with the kind of abstract fantasy version of revenue neutral, which is the amount we would change the current tax rate to make last year's property bill the same as this year's property bill. So that would be like 28 cents on $100?
That's correct, yeah. 28, I think 0.6, I believe, is the number that pops up in my head. I don't have it in front of me, but yes, it's right in there. There's another, and just to kind of mess with your head a little bit more, each penny that we talk about here has equates to a value of used to be $5 million. Now it's because of the valuation. It's now worth $8 million.
Exactly. So penny. If you're listening to this and you're saying, why are they hemming and hawing over pennies? We are hemming and hawing over potentially tens of millions of dollars. So
thank you, Ben.
Every penny counts.
And that's why you're going to see we'll even get to the half cent, and at times they've even gone to the quarter cent.
Yes.
But whatever time you hear that, think that $8 million is what the value of each one of those pennies are. So to get to the exact amount of revenue coming in from property tax, we would drop it down to that 28.6 cents per $100 of value. However, there's a lot of things have happened since 2021 when we had our last revaluation, and a lot of inflation has happened. According to our finance department, it equates to 23% inflation. Which means that essentially we set the tax rate in 2021. We have adjusted it twice since then. We've actually dropped the tax rate twice down to where it currently is at 45. We originally set it at 47.5, and we now are at 45 cents per $100 value. But that tells you how much money that comes into the county and that we provide the core services for. On top of that, there's been a 23% increase in inflation, a lot of it happening in the last few years or a couple years, really. So to be able to continue to deliver the core services of the county, we need to make that adjustment. And that adjustment, once we go through all the calculations, is approximately $68 million. That's what we need, and our finance and our tax people and our county manager are in lockstep agreement that to bring everything up to what we would call revenue neutral in today's 2025's values of salaries and materials and equipment, we would need to add $68 million. And that's where we come up with the 38 cents. If I don't have it written down here. I believe it's 38 cents, 36 or 38 cents.
It's in that range. Yeah, I think there's too many moving parts to throw a dart right in the bullseye here. But I think the numbers I've gotten from the county are around 36 to 38 cents. So that would be I've been calling it adjusted revenue neutral. I'm not sure that's the term of art, but it's close enough.
Yeah, actually, now it's all coming back like a bad dream. It's 36 cents.
Okay,
that gets us to $68 million. That gets us to what we would consider, or our county management would consider, is revenue neutral. Then on top of that, we know we have a number of projects that are coming up as we continue with what we call the Last Frontier, the water and sewer partnership that we have with Cape Fear Public Utility Authority, bringing water and sewer up to Holly Shelter, Sidbury Road, and Plantation Road, which is currently under construction. And we have money that's going into that. We have money that will continue to go into our workforce housing fund at a tune of $3 million a year. So, and then I'm sure I'll get to it. Some of the school funding things, New Hanover High School, but also the other what we do with Pine Valley Elementary, Mary C. Williams Elementary. Those also kind of factor into that. So we know we have other big projects coming forward. So in my mind, we should be prepared for something slightly north of 36 cents per $100 of value. And that will mean, yes, there will be a tax increase caused by that slight increase of a tax rate. It will not be anywhere near as dramatic as what we're seeing with your valuation going up. I mean, I've been getting a lot of calls. Some who have seen as much as 100%, or in one case, 200% increase on their property values. That was very unusual. I also, on the other side, got a call from a long email from a constituent who was very upset about what worked out when I did the math, a 23.5% increase in their valuation. But, it depends on your lens. Our main goal, and after going through all that, is to make sure that taxpayers keep as much money as they possibly can, and we continue to be able to drive and deliver the core values or the core services of that the county, New Hanover County, provides, and also continues with the quality of life that we have here. I think we do a good job of protecting the taxpayer's pocket in this, but we do need to accept reality in the sense of the inflation. So there will be, most people will see some form of a tax increase. It should not be dramatic.
All right. So I think I appreciate that. That helps set the table here a little bit. And I think some of the more frustrated messages we get are people who are still kind of confused or upset about what happened in 2021, where I can take some responsibility for this. I feel like both the media and the county staff did a poor job of explaining what was happening. County staff kept saying the tax rate was going down, and people were looking at their tax bill, which had gone up from the previous year, and they were very upset. And I think that's understandable. And I think we didn't get in front of that train as reporters to say, hey, these are the terms that you are going to be hearing. So that's what we're talking. In one sense, it is about the reevaluation because the terms have changed. Every penny is worth a different amount. So every penny is worth more now. But we are also having basically the same budget debate conversation that we have every year, which is what is the balance between services and, as you put it, protecting the taxpayer's pocketbook, because You've been to the grocery store, or maybe you've tried to replace a bridge, but you know things are more expensive now.
Yes.
Than they have been.
Yeah, life is more expensive
Life is
all
more
the way
expensive.
around. And we may not get to it here. Insurance rates on top of that. Homeowners insurance. And especially for those people who live in some of our coastal communities here, almost impossible to get.
People feel hemmed in from almost every side.
That's right.
So there have been some calls, and I think this is in part motivated because, at least on paper, right, there's a lot more cash on the table, right?
Right.
So people have suggested that this is an opportunity to make deep cuts. We've heard from quite a few fiscal hawks. Now, I will note, no one has suggested we try to get down to that 28 cents. No one reasonable, right? No one who doesn't want to just blow up the whole government.
Good.
But there is, I think, some healthy debate about, is this year, like every year, a chance to consider tightening the county's belts because people at home are tightening their belts?
Right. And believe me, we'll look for those efficiencies as much as we possibly can. But frankly, I think we do a pretty good job. Certainly with our personnel and being very careful and very selective about those projects that we invest in, so that we look at the long-term benefit for all the taxpayers. We represent, of course, everybody in the city as well as the county and the beach towns as well. They all fall under the county. So, I don't see that any wholesale cuts similar to what we're experiencing at the federal side here. I don't see that happening. And, somebody could argue me out of that, but I don't see it and would not be supportive of that at this time.
So I have heard people suggest that we let an Elon Musk type character loose on the state government or even local government. I would note that, county government, and you know this better than most people, is a little different in that we don't get pork barrel pet projects quite the same way as we do at the state level. I once covered a state bill where a representative wanted to require that muscadine grape juice grown in her district be available in every public school in the state. So you're not likely to find that kind of thing in the New Hanover County budget.
Absolutely not.
But would you be open to, maybe something that was a bit turning over more rocks than perhaps had been turned over in the past?
Always open, to healthy dialogue and criticism and constructive criticism. I might note that we also have auditors at the county who go through department by department and check to make sure they're following all the policies and procedures that we have at the county. The only place I would like to put a little bit of a shade on that is whatever suggestions come, it really needs to come back to the elected officials. We're the ones responsible. So one of the issues I have with the Elon Musk format that is happening up there is that we have somebody who is not responsible or accountable to the taxpayers, making life-changing cuts to a lot of programs, and in some cases not having the background to be able to honestly determine whether what they're doing is good, bad, or different, or even having enough deep policy background to really make the decision as to whether this should be kept on or not. That's where I would caution if we have somebody taking a look at what we're doing here in the county and making suggestions. But I think in some ways, I've got 237,000 of those people right now kind of calling with their suggestions. And I take every one of those, and I know all of our commissioners, very seriously as to areas where we could take a hard look at and see if we could cut or find a more efficient way to do it.
I know. So there is a philosophy in the tech industry where you basically turn it off. Turn a department off and see what happens. And if nothing happens, then maybe you didn't need that department. And that's how Musk was able to streamline Twitter, although there were times when Twitter was down for a couple of days. I think people react differently when a private company is down versus when their government is down. So food for thought. But,
thank you, Ben. Yes.
Okay, so to the point of some of the places people have suggested cutting.
Of course.
One, let's just get right to this one. This is the most contentious one, I think, is the suggestion that the county do away with its DEI department for two reasons. I'm trying to steelman these arguments. One is that, yes, it is around $600,000, which is not no money. It is also in the neighborhood of 0.1% of the county's overall budget. But there's been a suggestion that If the current way the county does DEI runs afoul of executive orders, it could cost the county in terms of federal grants or other federal support. Do you buy that argument? Are you concerned about that argument? Do you think that's a place to look?
I've asked the question, and I know that there are some minimal funding not related to the DEI that because of the grants that we get that have been put on hold and paused that do affect the county. It's not a huge amount of money because we generally, outside of the schools funding coming in from the federal government, we don't get a lot of money from there. We get money from the state, and you can make the argument that money flows from the feds to the state to us. Where I think it would really hurt us is if we get into Medicaid cuts. Quite a different animal. We'll leave that aside here. But as far as the DEI program or department that we have currently at the county, the question I keep stumbling over or can't get a clear answer is, what do you mean by DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? I think that there's this overall thought that that's being thrown around that is thought of in a very negative connotation. Things like employment, and setting quotas for employment and preferential treatment in hiring and in promotion, none of which happens at the county. I can guarantee you. I've gone over to Linda Thompson, who is our wonderful person who runs DEI. She says, of course not. Has never been a part of it. So, getting a clear definition of what do you mean when we say we need to cut DEI. And I go back to, and asking Linda, what do you do? And she points to the language access plan, which fell into her department, so that it allows people who are hard of hearing or people who may even speak another language, how can they access county services, or really specifically, if they come to a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, how can they know what's going on? If you're elderly or not even elderly, if you're young and you have a hearing impairment, you can't hear, thus you can't participate. It was that department, our DEI department, that came up with this plan. It's wonderful, and working with AI, artificial intelligence, is now advanced enough. So we now have templates or little pads, iPads that we keep a stock of them, 10, 12 of them at every meeting now. So if you have hard of hearing or even a language, because they work in multiple languages, you are now handed one. So the AI has advanced to the point where it's very accurate and almost instantaneous. So you can sit in one of our meetings, and even if you can't hear a word, you can look down and you can read in broad print everything that's going on, and you can now participate in your county government. We also have them in the different departments over at the county building, including the tax department, the permitting department, et cetera. So you don't have to let language or hard of hearing become a barrier to you to access the county. She's also, that department, the DEI department, was very active in the PFAS issue and the well testing that we had. We knew we had a number of private wells in some of the minority communities. And there was a lack of communication happening between, Chemours, of course, and their testing company, and CFPUA. And they were neighborhoods that were filled that people would not allow people to come onto their property to test their wells so they could figure out whether you've got a problem, whether you have contaminated water in there. Fell into our Linda Thompson's department, and they fanned out with her and her employees and were able to get literally thousands of wells tested that we could not access prior to that by being able to go in and be a trusted member of different areas of our community. The food access plan that they developed. These are all jobs that they do in our DEI that have nothing to do with what we consider as diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they are huge things within our community. The food access plan is a collaboration with UNCW to develop a comprehensive food accessibility plan, an interactive map that literally is a map of New Hanover County that shows where we know we have food deserts and where people are not getting fresh food. and then sending out members of our DEI department to literally knock on doors, find community leaders within that, and show them, give them access to the different programs we have in the county that will get them fresh food, and so that you don't have to live in a food desert when you live in New Hanover County. And there's another one, improving the 911 language access. And many people's worst moments in their life, in a total panic. They have a fire, there's a car accident, there's an injury, a lost child. They jump on the phone, they call 911, and we are finding that our operators couldn't help because of a language access problem here. We put members who are bilingual, into the 911 department like that through the DEI department, so that those calls, when they come in, would be immediately transferred to somebody who can interpret and translate for that, so that we can get emergency services to the people in our county who deserve it. And it doesn't matter, nobody asks questions about where you're from or whatnot. If you can't be understood, you can't get the help you need, and that's the problem they're solving there. So those are just a few of the programs that they are doing every day. Another one, which I loved, it was 2 weeks ago, I went down to Linda's office and said, "What are you working on today?" And she says, "Oh, we're coordinating the Ukrainian festival that was happening here." And I said, "Oh, Ukrainian?" She goes, "Yeah, there's a huge Ukrainian population that's here in New Hanover County, and they're trying to get a festival going, similar to like the Greek festival that's going. And so we're helping coordinate and point them to where they need to go to have their festival and their celebration, et cetera." That's what our DEI department is doing. It has nothing to do with quotas or hiring preferential treatment, any of that. So that's where I fall down on it. I think the work they're doing is really important and has helped elevate our county throughout the entire population of New Hanover County.
So you've all but said it, but I will
Yes.
say for the record that you don't feel like this is a secret Marxist plot to divide our community and destroy American capitalism.
No, I do not.
Okay.
But it is that heightened political thought like that. And I know you're, somewhat, joking in that. But
I am not joking. That is
Yes.
the expressed belief of people who have written the county.
And I would, yes, and I've seen some of those.
Yeah.
I would suggest to those people who feel that way to actually dig in. All the information I just gave you is readily available. You just have to call up Linda Thompson at the Department of, the DEI department over the county, and she will send you a complete list of the projects they are working on and what they do every day. I think hopefully they'll be impressed and drop this whole kind of polarizing political talk.
So another area I've heard people talk about when the idea of possible savings for the county comes up, and this has to do with the county's non-agency spending. These are nonprofits that, in many cases, for years,
That's right.
have been partially supported by the county. So the suggestion has been made that, given the increased sort of financial horsepower that the New Hanover County Endowment now has, is there a way to shift that funding, and we are talking about somewhere in the realm of $1.6 million a year,
Correct.
From the county to the endowment? I've had some conversations, as I mentioned, with your fellow commissioner, Dan Scalise, with some nonprofit people who are not allergic to the idea but are very concerned about what that transition would look like. I am a nonprofit employee, and I know that
Yes.
a single year of misfunding could mean losing one of our best reporters. So these, if you see, it's $40,000, that could be a key employee. I mean, it's a pretty significant concern. On the other hand, the endowment does have an incredible amount of financial resources and is already in the business of supporting nonprofits. So how do you think about that whole issue there?
First of all, let's make it clear that WHQR does not receive any grants from the county.
That is correct.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't want people to conflate that idea that
No.
We're talking about cutting your job or one of your reporters' jobs. That's not on the table. Let's go to the endowment piece first. I think Dan Winslow, who's the new CEO, I've met with him several times. All the commissioners have. It sounds like he's got a great plan, and he's created his rainbow plan, which looks terrific on paper, and he's a very personable person to sit down and if everything that's in his head right now gets done, I think our community will really begin to see the benefits of the endowment. But I guess maybe I've been doing this stuff for a while. It's show me the reality, and I think we're all waiting for the disbursements. They're now going to come out on a rolling basis to see what that support to the nonprofits, especially the smaller nonprofits, really looks like. Cash in hand, money in the bank. Because one of the the undertones that's happened with the nonprofit community over the last several years is the endowment is there, and yes, that was the express purpose. I had a small hand in writing the endowment into being there. It was meant to support and to make transformative changes to these smaller nonprofits that are doing good work, that have shown they've got the horsepower, shown that they can make a difference. But the money was not flowing to them. We've seen some of that, and the endowment has their own board of directors, so I don't want to step on in their way. But they've so far found more success in their minds of supporting some larger institutions, UNCW, the Cape Fear Community College, for really wonderful programs around nursing, et cetera. But that same focus at this point has not gone down to the nonprofits. And we have here in New Hanover County, if those of you who know me, you can go to the bathroom or get a drink out of the refrigerator for the next couple of minutes here. Because
they've heard this speech before.
They've heard this speech before. Nonprofits in our town do a lot of the work that the county should be doing.
Examples of YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, Coastal Horizons.
Domestic violence.
Carousel Center.
Workforce housing, affordable, all those. And they do it, the nonprofits do it better, more efficiently. It means that we don't have to stand up a department for it. We don't have to bring on full-time employees, and they're wonderful. So I think that the county and our community gets the better end of the shake out of all that if we throw a few dollars to help them with their budgets every year to make sure that they flourish and they continue to grow as we have a growing population here in New Hanover County. So, okay, everybody can come back now. I've finished that. So that's why when I first came on as a commissioner years ago, I identified that and said, hey, we need to show some support so that we can continue to get the best out of those nonprofits. If that dynamic shifts, if the endowment steps in a big way and starts to provide them resources on a regular basis, I would be open, but I want to stay open to kind of pulling back on some of that funding. But right now, Carousel Center, just take one example. The work they do is unbelievable. I couldn't do it. It is really, really, really important work for especially children who have been abused or had to gone through a traumatic situation. A one-stop shop where you can go in, tell your story, and not be dragged through the court system. And what they deal with on a daily basis. I can't say enough good words. Amy Feith, every time I see her, I just go up and hug her. I try to, absorb some of what she has seen and what she has felt. And I think she just does incredible work. And that's just one nonprofit. And I will advocate that those kind of what I call core nonprofits continue to get the county because the county support. Because even if they do get some money from the endowment, there's not some limiting factor. If they can expand and make their, what they're doing for our community better, and they need another $40,000 or $50,000 a year from the county, and they can get some money from the endowment, and they can increase by exponentially what they're doing, I think that only benefits everybody in New Hanover County. And again, we're not having to stand up a department. We're not having to be responsible for them. As well as, the endowment, as we've seen over the 4 years of their existence, their focus may shift over years. So I don't want to abandon nonprofits that I think are really important. where it gets a little trickier, Ben. And I'm sorry, I know you're ready to move on, but you started the conversation.
I opened the can of worms. Now I have to eat them. So go ahead.
It's when we get into the arts world there, and which I particularly feel is an important part of New Hanover County and certainly the city of Wilmington. And I've stood in support of our arts community, arts and cultural community, and I believe they continue to need support from the county because the economic draw that they have for every dollar put into arts and culture here in New Hanover County brings in an additional $5, $10, $15 in extra money that derives from their support of them. And I'm really looking at the larger arts programs, things like the Cameron Art Museum that are established. We're not talking about one-off. They have to be able to qualify a nonprofit status, and they have to have at least 2 years of existence to show that they've got the ability to be able to to do what they need to do. And in that's unrelated though, are things like Feast Down East. Those people who are out there in our community identifying those areas where people need the basic things of life, like food. And again, that's an area that possibly the endowment could step into. So far, they haven't in a major way. And I think it's important for our citizens that the county be there to show some sort of support for those nonprofits.
All right, so we're talking about the endowment. So I want to go one step further because I've seen some county emails from this week and listened in on a few conversations, had a few conversations, following the endowment's announcement of a grant to the North Carolina Aquarium.
That's right.
Now, I haven't heard anything bad about this. Everyone loves the aquarium, and if you're like me, you love the otters. And but this is a capital investment grant. And the aquarium, people who don't know, is a state-run organization. And this is, I'm not saying it's a total radical change, but it is a bit of a shift in how the endowment has been seen by some people. Early in its days, it was seen as not being really tasked with funding the government. Now, the language is a bit more nuanced. It's not supposed to be the primary source of funding for government. But basically, the idea was the endowment funds nonprofits, not government. And it's not supposed to step in and fill the breach for government. But that seems to have shifted a little bit. So the argument, as people might imagine, was, well, if the endowment can step in and help seal the deal on a capital project for the aquarium, a government-run organization, could it not do the same for, say, a brand new high school or a high school that was in need of, let's say 9 figures of repairs? And here, of course, I am talking about New Hanover High School.
Yes.
So how do you think about the endowment's evolving role when it comes to those big capital projects, especially for the schools, which do fall on your guys' shoulders as the county?
Yes, it does. I would prefer that the state step in and do the job. We've already paid our taxes, and we continue to pay our taxes. Fix. I'll get back to the endowment piece in a second. But again, you asked the question. Low-hanging fruit, in my mind, is the lottery. That was when it came alive, a dozen years ago. It had a 40 clause in there. 40% of the endowment proceed of the lottery proceeds would go back to our schools, and that's how they sold it, and it's become wildly popular. And the state legislature saw how much money was coming in and decided, rather than the 40%, to put a cap at there, which was originally set at $100 million, and that's for all schools in the state of North Carolina. I believe there's 115 school districts throughout the state, and I think that recently that was raised to $110 million out of the lottery. If they went back simply one shift to their original document and did 40%, it would mean tens, if not hundreds of millions more going into that pot of money that would come out to the schools. Now, it's not to say that it would solve all problems, but boy, that would be a major shift in school funding that the state has full control over and would be more direct, I guess I'll call it, to the taxpayers of the entire state of North Carolina, and for those playing the lottery. Who are always told, you're supporting the schools. It's the lottery, school lottery. Go. So to me, that is the lowest hanging fruit of there. Now we shift over to the endowment. Yes, I think they could. I think they, by funding institutions, like UNCW, Cape Fear Community College, the aquarium. Yes, that does open the door for them, and I'm sure that we're going to see some asks. I know they've already made one disbursement to our school system for a specific project. But I know what you're talking about is subtly different, but it is a seismic change when they start talking about major facilities support. It certainly would be really helpful in our community if we were to, find a huge partner in the endowment, especially looking at New Hanover High School. We have that facilities report that we paid. The county paid $300,000 for. That covers the entire work that needs to be done over at New Hanover High School. We're waiting for that to come out. That should be out very soon, end of March, early April, and that's going to really inform us as we move forward into the budget season as to where we want to go. My sense is we'll probably need a bond to cover that. It's going to be a big number. We just don't know how big it's going to be. There have been a lot of problems, although it's 102 years old. Goodness gracious, we've gotten our money's worth out of the building here. And the question will then shift to, do we take it down or do we try and restore it? Frankly, I fall down on trying to restore it as long as that report is not too damning, essentially, as to what the problems are. And the preliminary reports we've heard in speaking with some of the engineers and stuff is that it's not a total teardown by any means. That there's a lot left there, and there's a lot of attention and real care being made, especially on the side that faces Market Street, to bring back, frankly, better than it's looked in the last 50 years, which would be very exciting.
I do know that there will need to be a clear-eyed assessment of the situation. A lot of people have a lot of very understandably nostalgic memories of people who are alumni, people who grew up in downtown Wilmington. I think they will. I've had some conversations with some people involved here, and they will have to decide what is best for the kids and what is best for longevity over maybe what feels right. That'll be a tough call, but a different conversation.
Yeah. Basically,
I expect to see nine figures, one way or the other. It's going to be a lot of money. To that point, putting a bond on the 2026 ballot, I would assume.
Yes.
Is, I've heard a little pushback on this idea, but I must say largely from people who I don't think understand how the bond works.
Yeah. Everybody has an opinion. The 2026 elections, which will be midterms, and the reason why it has to happen in the even number years, it has to be a county-wide bond. And so county and state elections and federal elections all happen in even number. The municipal, like the city of Wilmington elections, happen in the odd number years, and that's why we have city council votes coming up this year in November. Just to kind of set the playing field there. That's why we're talking about 2026. I think that 2026 is going to be a very active voting season. It'll be the midterms, midterm of the Trump administration, and there may be great support or there may be a large backlash. We don't know, but I think that you're going to see a lot of people, come out and vote. And then now you're into, reading the tea leaves. If you're trying to run a school bond, which my sense will be, in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and this, when you say a bond, it has a kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling about it. But what it means is we're borrowing money that you, the taxpayer, are going to have to pay back. So it's pretty serious stuff when you start talking in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars. And it gets people really thinking about, gee, do I want to make that kind of investment in there? So the language and the education of our community is a key component in this anytime you decide to do a bond. But there will probably be a lot of people very energized, maybe over different subjects, different political subjects, who will be there, and they'll be faced with a bond, whether they want to vote for it, yes or no. I think in this case, the need has been kicked down the road for, I'll call it a decade, of what we need for not only New Hanover High School, but those others that I mentioned, Pine Valley, MC Williams. There's also talk of a new school on the land that they've given down there at River Lights, putting one in there, and multiple other maintenance issues in all of our schools. the money's got to come from somewhere, and the county's responsible for it, the county and the state. So we have to create that money, and the time is now. I don't think we can kick it off or put it off for another cycle, say to 2028, which would be the next one. So I think there will be a school bond there. And that's just me, one person, speaking on it. But putting together all those elements I just described, I see it coming forward in 2026. And a lot of voters, which is appropriate, a lot of people in New Hanover County are going to come out and they'll tell us whether or not they want to take on that debt.
I will say, I've heard from both sides of the aisle, people all over the sort of political spectrum, and they prefer bonds to direct, Board of Commissioners directed funding, because this is about as close as we get to direct democracy.
I agree, Ben.
These days. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think you guys voting to put it on the ballot is one part of the process. But
right.
At the end of the day, people get the chance to go to the ballot and have their say.
Well, it's, there's a reason when you come to school, public schools here and charter schools, because this bond will affect, the county pays for public and charter schools. There's a reason why you come to New Hanover County and why you get a better education than, say, Hyde County or Gate County. There, we have more resources, and that has a direct connection to the number of teachers, the number of amenities, everything from sports to different clubs, etc. We offer, I believe, and I'm pretty opinionated about this or biased on it, a better education than you can find in many, many of the other counties across North Carolina, and I'm pretty proud of that. And I know our school board is too. And our numbers now out of the pandemic are starting to really show that. So I want to make sure that our schools are supported and our school-age population and the parents are fully funded.
So to that point, one of the issues that gets debated every year is kind of the funding for the school system.
Yeah.
I know that there is an ask sort of being workshopped. You guys got kind of a preview at the recent budget meeting, kind of a 30,000-foot view
Yes.
of what they might be asking for, which does include cost of living increases and,
right.
and some other things. I mean, do you feel like what Superintendent Christopher Barnes is bringing forward is kind of, you feel like that's reasonable, or do you feel like there needs to be some conversation there?
Well, I find Superintendent Barnes very reasonable, and I think he's done many good things, and one of it is kind of opened up the communication between his own board, the faculty, and the students' parents, and the county commissioners. I know for the first time, since I've been a commissioner, I'm invited to the finance committee meetings of the school board themselves. And so I've been able to track it. And I may not agree with everything, but I certainly hear it. And I hear it as it's being discussed, and more importantly, what's behind it. Why are you bringing this up? And you're absolutely right. They are talking about a number of increases that they want to bring to us. In New Hanover County, again, the state puts in money into the schools, and then the county has per pupil county supplemental funding. And that's a number. It currently sits at $3,704 per student. So we have, just call it roughly 25,000 students in there. So that's easy math. You just take 25,000 students in the system and multiply times that 3,704, and that's where the county part of the school budgets comes from. The state kicks in somewhere around $7,000 per student. I may be off a little bit there, but it's in that range. You put those two pots of money together and then sprinkle a little bit of federal money that comes in grant form like that, and that's how much money the schools have to work with. With the enhancements, we'll call them, that Superintendent Barnes is bringing forward, and it's rough. We're still trying to calculate it out, but he's looking at increasing that by several hundreds of dollars, the county supplemental part.
To somewhere around $4,100.
Yeah, I'm looking at, the answer is yes, between $4,000 and $4,100 per student, which translates, again, into several millions of more dollars in county money. And keep in mind, this is not a one-time lift. This now becomes recurring money. So it doesn't ever seem to kind of go down. It always continues to go up. I remember, going back 10 years ago, there used to be large and very robust debate when they would come to us for a $100 increase in the county supplemental funding. which we would always negotiate, but generally we gave everything they needed. So this will be a really heavy lift, and that will also factor into the first part of this conversation of where the money comes from, and in this case, property tax. And do we have that revenue stream coming in with the property tax? And that relates down to those pennies that we were talking about. How many pennies per value of whether we stick at 36 cents per $100 value for the county tax rate, or we move that to say 38 cents. That would give us enough headroom so that we could meet all the needs of the school system.
So I've been giving the shout out.
Yeah.
So I've been giving the shout out with each commissioner that I've had the chance to speak with about this. Is that the county has set up this online tool where you can tinker with the tax rate yourself. You can tinker with the tax rate. You can tinker for funding for different departments, whether that's public safety or the landfill or education, whatever you want. And I think it is. It may not be everyone's idea of fun. I'm a budget wonk, so it's fun for me. But I think it is educational, because you see little changes have big repercussions. Yeah. And it is hard, for example, if you looked at the county's roughly $500 million budget and said, okay, I'd like to shave 10% off of that.
Right.
Well, you start pushing negative signs in different departments, and it takes a while. It's tricky.
It's really difficult. And I go back to an earlier comment. Again, I don't think any of our departments are bloated or have extra money hanging around. I hear the exact opposite, that they all could do more if they had more, but we try not to give them so much so that I don't see any waste. We ask them to be really efficient all the time. So you're right, Ben. If you want to make that several $100s more per student, that money again has to come from someplace, and it can't just be what we've recently seen through ARPA money or grant money that's come down from the federal government. It's got to be a revenue source.
So this is a conversation we have had, many other people have had, is that for the last 4 years there has been a tremendous amount of federal money sloshing around, which has led to allegations that not everyone, and I'm not singling out any specific government, but not everyone has been as judicious with this money or as thoughtful or as self-aware of how they were spending the money. Some people ran out of money, and it was like their credit card got declined, and they didn't see it coming. And I think this is part and parcel of a larger philosophical question. This is the last question I want to put to you, is that I see a lot of, I'm just going to be blunt here, a lot of nastiness in online conversations about government employees. We mentioned Elon Musk earlier, and he has referred to bureaucrats as the parasite class, or that they are evil, or they are corrupt, or they are criminal. And I am not a reporter who works in the Beltway, so I've never been inside the FBI or inside the, NSA or CIA, and I'm sure there's some shenanigans. But I do cover local government. I've covered local government for quite a while. I have not come across a parasite class or too many criminals. There have been occasionally criminals. They've been, fired.
Yes, that's right.
But so I just want to sort of lay this out, like, do you feel like people get that? When you're out in the community talking to people, do you feel like people understand that the people who work at the county are basically honest and doing their level best and are trying to operate fairly leanly, as some have suggested they should be? Because the counterexample, or I guess the counterfactual maybe, that some people put forward is that, like, oh, you guys are just relying on the county manager, who is just relying on department heads, who is just relying on, unit leaders, and that you really aren't seeing into the machinery. So that's a big, long question, but it's basically my way of asking, do you have faith that this is going the way it should be, that it is being operated the way it should be? Do you feel like you look under the hood enough?
I know I look under the hood enough, and you can go to almost any department over at the government center. I'm one of those local politicians that actually walks around and walks in unannounced to different departments to ask for things.
I'm sure that is well received all the time.
Well, and you know what? It is. I'm received with respect, and what can I do for you? And I need a map for here. I need an explanation as to or a legal definition there, and it is right there. If there is waste or inefficiency going on, I don't see it, and I get around a lot. And a lot of people talk to me in the grocery store, in the government center, in the parking lot, heck, on the street, right out these studios. People, recognize me, and they come right up and they feel comfortable, and I'm glad they do, to say, hey, I don't think this is going right. And they'll know, and I will follow up. I'll look into whatever it is that they have an issue with. I mentioned this earlier. This one woman who wrote me and was just bitterly angry about her tax revaluation, which she thought was her tax rate going up. And I wrote her back. It took me 2 hours on Sunday to write back a very long explanation, and to explain to her that it really works out to 23.5% of an increase, whereas majority of people, myself included, are seeing anywhere from a 50 to 60% or more percent increase in their values. But please balance that against what you receive through the county, and everything from emergency services to the sheriff's department working to the 16 parks that we have that the county funds, and including a huge expansion up at the Northern Regional Park that's going to happen. That's gotten no press, by the way. It's 102 acres, coming online because of demand, in that park. It's going to be wonderful. They're adding several more ball fields and lights, so it'll be fully activated in the day and the night. I mean, it's just great. The number of trails that we're doing out at Smith Creek, which I know there's some people out there who are, annoyed about we're taking an expansion area there, and we're going to very passively just add a walking trail in it to make it that area, that Smith Creek Park, accessible to everybody.
I do live there. I see the signs. I talk to people there all the time who are feel like you are paving paradise,
which we are not. But what we are doing is opening it up so everybody in our community will have an opportunity to see that wonderful area and keeping it as pristine and undeveloped as possible. Please, if anybody hears this, spread that word out there. But these are, some of the things that we do here in the county that are all great, and I would love to hear more positive on that. But that's, things like the taxes that we're talking about, and our staff, our Parks and Gardens staff, our tax department led by Allison Snell. You have never seen more hardworking and truthful, and people who, if you walk in there, you will be treated with respect, and you will get what you need done. This is very important now because we have a lot of people who are going to be appealing, some who have already started to appeal. So I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you have a bad experience, and by that I don't mean you don't get the answer you don't want, but a rude experience, I would like to hear about it, and I know our county manager and the rest of our commissioners would like to hear it. We just don't. I mean, occasionally there's a one-off like that, but usually when you dig into it, you'll see that there was, more to the story. So I don't see a huge amount of waste and fraud or inefficiency that's happening around New Hanover County. A lot of it has to do with the point that you're inferring to, is it is local government. And so we get to know our employees on a day-to-day basis, and more importantly, the people in our community who interact with the county know us in the community and feel hopefully comfortable enough to come forward. Or they go to you, Ben, and you jump on the microphone and say, "Hey, county, what about this?" Which is great. That's the beauty of local government.
Fair enough. Well, anything else you would want to say about this? Again, I'll repeat the caveat that we are in media res here. We are in the middle of the budget story, not the beginning, but certainly not the end.
Well, if you have more questions or want to continue this conversation offline, you can always reach out to the county and their website. And you just click on the commissioner's thing, and it'll give you all my contact information. I'd be more than happy to have in-person, telephone, email, text conversations with anybody who has more questions or has a different point of view.
I will say, in my professional career, I've been stonewalled by a lot of government officials. So you guys are pretty responsive on the board.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
Look,
that, Ben.
credit where credit is due.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Rob Zapple, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, well, that's it for today's show. Thank you to New Hanover County Commissioner Rob Zapple. I'm Ben Schachman. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join us for the next edition of The Newsroom.